This is an important video because really you're going to learn everything that you need to know about solving square and cube root equations for the summative in this one video. So let's start with a little review, and hopefully this is easy for you after the last unit. What number when multiplied by itself equals 25? You know that 5 times 5 equals 25. Therefore we can say that the square root of 25 is 5. So this, again, should be pretty easy for you given 6 times 6, given the last unit. 6 times 6 is 36, so we can say that the square root of 36 is 6. However, we also know that negative 5 times negative 5 equals 25. So the square root of 25 might also be negative 5. And negative 6 times negative 6 also equals a positive 36. So the square root of 36 might also be a negative 6. All right, let's switch from that for a second. I want you to write the word 2. So take a second and write the word 2 for me. How many of you wrote 2 like this? Or this 2, or this 2. Without the context, we didn't know which one you wanted me to have you write. Were there 2 kids, or we're going to the store? Without that context, we didn't know which one we wanted to write. Or what about the word there? Write the word there for me. You could write this there, or you could write this there. Without the contents of this sentence, we don't know which one to write. And the reason I bring this up is because that's like square roots. If I just say, what is the square root of 25, you don't know if I am talking about, the 5 or the negative 5. So here's the rule with square roots. If I ask you to simplify something and that square root is given to you, it's already written in. The square root is already written. This gives you the context. I tell you if I want the positive square root or the negative square root given the symbol in the front. If there isn't a symbol in the front, then I want the positive. This reads the negative square root of 4. So I know that it's the negative 2. This reads, and this is called the principal square root, by the way, principal positive, the square root of 25. We don't have a plus sign, but we don't with numbers either. If I just wanted you to write positive 10, you wouldn't do plus 10. You would just say 10. So it's like that. We don't have the plus in front or positive sign. It's assumed. So this reads the square root of 25. I know I'm talking about the positive one. Whoops. Where this says the negative square root of 25, so we know we're talking about the negative. Now, if you're solving an equation where the radical symbol, and by the way, this is called the radical symbol. If you have to write it in, the context is not given. We don't know if we're talking about the positive or the negative, so we have to include both roots. So here, x squared equals 4. To solve this, the opposite of squaring is taking the square root. It undoes each other. So the square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 4, we don't know. I had to write that in, so I don't know if I'm talking about the positive or the negative, so I'm going to write both. All right, so one more time. If you are solving, this is called a quadratic equation. Quadratic is squared. If you're solving a quadratic equation, you have to undo the squared by taking the square root of it. Just like addition undoes subtraction, and subtraction undoes addition, and multiplication undoes division, etc., the square root undoes the squared. So the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 25, I did not know the context. I didn't know if it was positive or negative, so I'm going to write both. Also, just a heads up for your summative, if you do not show me the radical symbols, I cannot give you a proficient. You have to show me that you understand that what you are doing is taking the square root. All right, so let's write down the steps to solving square root equations. You're going to isolate the x squared on a side by itself by working backwards. So you're going to isolate the x squared on a side by itself by working backwards. In other words, using those inverse operations that we reviewed yesterday. If it's multiplied, you divide. If it's divided, you multiply. Then you're going to take the square root of both sides, making sure that you show that radical symbol on both sides. So you're going to get the x squared on a side by itself, then you're going to take the square root of both sides, and don't forget, once you take the square root of both sides, to include both answers. And by that, remember, I mean both the positive and the negative. All right, let's do some examples. The first thing you need to do is isolate the variable of the x squared on a side by itself. So for this example, it already is. So then we are going to undo that x squared by taking the square root of both sides. And yes, I need to see that radical symbol. And then x equals, and we're not going to forget, both roots, positive and negative. So the square root of 16 is 4, and we have to include both, because 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Pause and try to do this next problem by yourself. All right, I see that it's already, the x squared is on a side by itself, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x equals, because the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 144 is 12, because 12 times 12 is 144, but negative 12 times negative 12 is also 144. Okay, for this next example, the x squared is not on a side by itself. We have to get rid of whatever is with it before we can continue. So I'm going to draw my line going down. It says plus 10, so we are going to subtract 10. It says plus 10, so we're going to subtract 10, and if we do it on one side, we have to do it on the other. Again, inverse operations. We have to take away 10 because we have 10 too many. So now that cancels, so I have x squared equals 35 minus 10 is 25. Now I've isolated my x squared, and so I have to the next step is taking the square root of both sides. So the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 25 is 5, but we cannot forget both answers. All right, this last example, and again, I know that you might not know exactly how to do everything. You might need to watch the video a couple of times, but it's going to take practice. You just have to practice, practice, practice. So do a couple problems, check your answers. Do a couple problems, check your answers. All right, so for this one, the x squared is not on a side by itself, so I'm going to draw on my line. I'm going to find my x squared. Remember, you have to get rid of anything added or subtracted first, and then multiplied and divided. So it says minus 15, so to undo a minus 15, we have to add 15. So now I have 2x squared left, and then 3 plus 15 is 18. It says it's multiplied. Now here's my x squared. It's multiplied by 2, so we're going to divide by 2. So x squared is 9. Now I have that square root on a side by itself, so I have the x squared on a side by itself, so I have to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x, the square root of 9 is 3, but we have to include both the positive and negative answers. All right, so I think that what we should do is just have you do your assignment practicing. I've also included cubes on there. What I want you to understand is if you see this symbol, it's the square root. But if something is cubed, that means you have 3 factors. And if you have to undo it, you would take the cube root. And if I just left it like the symbol like this, it looks just like this. So if I'm taking the cube root, I need to put a little 3 in there so I know that I'm taking the cube root.